another philosophical pillow that, you know, we reflect deeply upon is this whole thing called modeling behavior. And, you know, we want to teach kids through instruction and telling, and kids need to do things through learning. And why is that? It's really the simple brain science of the mirror neuron, that we all, you know, a certain percentage of our motor cortex is full of these things called mirror neurons, and they were designed to just follow motion. And one of the greatest things we talk about is vulnerability. When it comes to developing empathy, we know that the unwillingness to make yourself vulnerable will reduce someone's empathy or the growth of empathy. And I always tell educators, and that's why this pillow is so important, that if you want a kid to be vulnerable, they have to see you be vulnerable. Like, not be a carpet and lay down and let them tread on, but they've got to, how will they know how to be vulnerable if they don't see you be vulnerable? And that's truly the secret to raising a child. It's the secret to education, is to model certain behaviors in front of them so they actually can practice and do what you're doing.
Yeah, I think, you know, this modeling behavior pillow really is, I think it was born out of the Nick story. And remember, the idea of understanding these 13 pillows deeply and implementing them into daily practices is being reflective. And, you know, for me, I called him and told him this story, and it was a powerful moment. I really think that that's when the modeling behavior pillar was born. We had the science around mirror neurons, and, you know, if you can actually stress him out by telling a negative story to someone else in earshot. So if I'm talking to a colleague about how much I hate kids, or I hate that kids don't listen, or frustrated with that kid, and he's listening to that, it's actually activating those neurons. And why would I ever be able to expect him to be kind or compassionate to that kid or accepting, right? So that was kind of like where we were early. And then this one day I get this amazing experience out of accident. But again, I'm being reflective in my practices. So I had a buddy that was out for the day, and he has a substitute, and I covered the beginning of his class just so the substitute could kind of have an advantage to getting the class started on time with a bunch of 6th graders. And I didn't really even know my friend's class. Our school had around 950 kids in it, so I'd never really seen his class or taught it. It was an off period for me, and I was off doing my own thing usually that period, but instead I started this class. And there was a kid at the other end of the locker room. It's a long, narrow space, and I'm giving directions to help the sub out, ultimately my friend that was absent. And this kid is in the back of a line of kids waiting to go outside to have class. And he's talking like on a high level, like that was kind of frustrating me, because I was like trying to do them all a favor. And, you know, the kids don't know that, but I'm like trying to get class started quick and give them all the directions so that the class can run smooth. And this kid is talking, and I'm getting angry because I'm like, he wasn't lowering his voice. I can handle a whisper, you know, like kids are going to do that. And I was like, hey, be quiet for a second so you know what's going on. And I startled him. And this kid obviously had some issues with authority, and he said, I wasn't talking. And I said, well, clear as day, you know, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you were, you little bugger. So I was like, yes, you were. All you got to do is zip it so I can give you the amazing directions. You know, so I got into a fight with him. And he mumbles something. And now I'm like, this little guy's got an attitude problem, right? And I was outside of what I normally do. So I was kind of like out there, and I'm starting to make some errors, right? I'm getting emotional. And I'm like, just stop so you can hear. And he says something again. So now this is strike 3. I said, get out. I kicked him out. So this is probably, I think, the last time I kicked somebody out of class. So I kick him out, get the class going, they disappear, I'm all by myself. I'm in my office and I'm thinking, I'm a jerk. I'm being reflective. I'm like, you idiot, you just kicked this kid out, you started the fight with him, you should have let it go. You're supposed to be a superhero, right? So I'm holding myself accountable. So I called the main office, I'm like, hey, is that kid down there? And his name was Nick, and this was years ago, so it's okay to say his first name. And she's like, yeah, I said, send Nick back. I said, I want to talk to him. So he comes in. Now, I said to myself, you know, I'm taller than this kid, I'm bigger than this kid. I'm going to sit down. I crossed my legs to just look like I was kind of relaxed. And I was nervous. And he comes in, And I'm trying to do my best job at like de-escalating him, right, and trying to win him over. And his fists are clenched. I'm not making this up. His fists were literally clenched, and he was ready to come back and fight more, because that's the long walk on it. Why the heck would I call him back? I obviously wanted to, yell at him more. So I said in a very calm voice, I'm like, hey man, I screwed up. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry I got you so mad at me. I thought you were talking. I was mistaken. I want you to go to class, and I want you to enjoy phys ed. I said, I'm going to write you a pass. I said, when your teacher comes back, I said his name, I said, when he comes back, we'll get a better start. We got off on the wrong foot. So as I'm writing the pass, I got my head down, and I had never really talked to the kid, and I hear this very high-pitched voice say, when does wrestling start anyway? And I looked up because I didn't know where it came from. It was this kid who, 10 seconds ago wanted to fight me, and he's just a little 6th grade boy, and I put him in a corner, right? So after the whole thing gets taken care of, I send him back outside. I call my friend. I'm like, hey, what's going on with this kid? I said, I just got into a fight with him. I kicked him out, and he goes, oh, he's oppositional defiant. He doesn't like men. He's got dad issues. Don't piss him off. Okay, I figured that out the hard way, right? So, but what had occurred to me in my reflection, and I called him very proud of, is I apologized to him. And how many times in his 11-year-old life has an adult male apologized to him? And I would probably think never has he been apologized to by an adult. And if I want him to understand humility, which is the ability to shut up when you're accidentally caught talking at the back of the line, I got to model it for him. Mm-hmm. And I can't force him to do it, right? Because what he's had modeled is confrontation and violence. So it was quite a powerful moment. So you got to model the behaviors you want to see them show. And kicking kids out is not a behavior I want kids to show.
So what do you do instead?
I find all kinds of strategies and ways, and I tolerate it. I deal with it. I ignore it. And then I strategically circle back and I flank them. And I say, hey, remember the other day when I was in line? I don't know you that well, but I was trying to get your class started and you were talking the whole time. It was really hard for me. That's a teachable moment, which is one of our upcoming pillars. But I think that there's always a timing factor. There's got to be a lot of patience on our part, and I think that's what makes us, and I always do this, superheroes. And that's Captain Spectacular, and he's bald, right? Looks a little like Superman, but he's got a goatee too. And I identify as a superhero. That's a huge part of our pillars, is we do some really challenging work every single day in the world of education.
My tagline for teachers in the middle of assemblies, which I said in yours, is it's always better to show kids and not tell them. It's always better to show kids and not tell them, because that's how these all start to weave together, like the brain science, a couple upcoming pillars, but you got to model that behavior. Whatever it truly is that you want a kid, you can't expect a kid to read a book if they never see you reading a book. Because you tell them to read a book, they're going to read a book. It doesn't work that way. All you have to do is have kids yourself and recognize, be reflective when your wife says, did you hear what she just said? She sounded just like you. Well, of course, because you've been modeling that behavior, so why wouldn't they do it? So really, truly understanding that philosophy is big time for an educator, an administrator, the behavior that we model. And I said this earlier, one of my favorite things to point out is just rolling your eyes at that kid that's late coming into the room, or saying something under your breath when that kid annoys you. You just gave every kid a license to do the same thing to the poor guy, the poor girl.
How would you recommend a better way of handling a kid who comes into class chronically late?
I think you got to put in some time and do a little research. Why? There was one year a girl was late to homeroom every day, but she was putting makeup on in her locker. And why wouldn't you pull her aside and have a conversation with her about coming in earlier to the locker room or to one of the bathrooms and getting her makeup done, or maybe buy her some makeup, or find in the school account for students. An 8th grade girl, makeup is pretty important. And if you knew her ACEs, you'd know that she had some intense toxic stress in her life, and there's probably a reason she's not doing it at home. So I think doing a little research, asking questions, there's a reason they're late. And it could be because they're dragging their feet and they're down the hall talking to somebody. But it could be because they're going a different way around the school because they don't want to come across kids that are, teasing them. So you got to do a little bit of the research and, figure out what the cause is before you respond with the quintessential lunch detention or quintessential 0 credit or sit in the hall. I mean, there's still people out there practicing that. Stay in the hall. You didn't make it in time for the bell. Now, that's fear, right? So is fear the way that you want to, manage your classroom? I don't think that works.
Well, it's shame and exclusion.
Torture.
Yeah. Sure.